Hi there. I've gotten a few comments in the past with people curious about my career as an art director and my industry and in general. People seem to want to know more about my job. So I thought I would do a video about how I got into this career. Specifically, I'm in advertising as an industry. So we can get into that. If you are curious about art direction or even graphic design, looking into it as a career, hopefully this can be helpful, color some context to at least how I got into it and my personal journey. Obviously, it's different for every person. Let's chat. I feel like I have to go way back to the beginning. And I feel like most people who work in the professional creative fields probably started off having an interest in arts and crafts or drawing when they were kids, and that was definitely the case for me. I feel like I have to credit Sailor Moon as my origin story. I think drawing Sailor Moon fan art just got me into the visual arts, honestly, and I just remember I was always like sketching and drawing the Sailor Scouts in kindergarten, and that's kind of where my start with drawing started. So I wouldn't even describe myself as a super skilled illustrator or fine artist or anything, but I like to do it a lot as a kid and throughout middle school and high school. I feel like I see this quote all the time about how we're all a museum of everything we've ever loved. And I'm like, wow, I'm just a museum of Toonami, I guess, and card captors. But it's true. In middle school, I took art classes in each grade, and I think I was honestly pretty lucky that my immediate friend group, we all were very into art. That was a big bonding point because we all had this shared interest in the visual arts. And I was in middle school in the early 2000s when the internet was a really fun place to be, and there was so much to discover. And nowadays the internet boils down to essentially 3 apps on your phone. Back then it was such a huge forum culture and blog culture. I'm thinking the Zanga days. Back then everybody would make their fun little personal websites on MapMice and GeoCities. And also people were really into customizing their MySpace pages. I would credit early 2000s internet to the start of my interest in what I now know is graphic design. I didn't really know that there was a term for it back then. I'm sure many people started off in Microsoft Paint, making my little pixel art. Big computer room kid. Honestly, I was really lucky that my middle school art teacher was so wonderful, and I know that my friend group was her favorite. I know this for a fact because, well, I don't know this for a fact, but I know she was quite fond of us because we're all still in contact. I still see her once every, 5-ish years, which is pretty unbelievable. Shout out Miss S. I want to say 8th grade was when I learned the term graphic arts or graphic design. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to design CD covers and design websites and all that fun stuff. It just seemed like the perfect crossover of my interest, which was being on the computer and drawing. Back then I had a really bootleg version of Photoshop on our family desktop computer I would begin to play around with. And then came high school. I actually went to a magnet high school in Central Florida where they had an art program. And you had to apply and submit a little portfolio. So I submitted my little 8th grade portfolio to get into this art program in the high school. I got in, along with 2 of my best friends at the time. So we all got into this art program. I remember being so nervous that I wouldn't get in. But I'm realizing that a lot of high schools didn't have this, but we had what they called a graphic arts class. You couldn't take that class until the 10th grade. 10th grade rolls around, we finally get to take graphic arts. And I loved this class. Had a wonderful, wonderful teacher who I became also very close with, Mr. H. He's the best. I think what was so good about the way he structured his class is he didn't restrict us to one medium. Yes, there was a lot of Photoshop involved, but I still remember that our very first assignment was to create a physical collage just using found material. And I think that is such a good exercise when it comes to design because it really teaches you to, one, curate, and two, really forces you to consider composition in every way. So that was our very first graphic arts assignment. And I remember he would always take like the top 5 or so projects that he liked the best, and I got up there and I was so happy about that, and thus started my graphic design path. Yeah, his class was great because we did work in Photoshop. We learned Photoshop. We didn't really touch any of the other Adobe programs, honestly. I feel like it was a little too advanced for us at the time. So I was like, focus on Photoshop. We also learned how to silkscreen, which was really cool. And we also learned film photography. So he taught us how to shoot with a film camera and how to develop our own film. All of these different mediums he had us play with. Oh, he also had us make little zines, little books. So all those different mediums, they all ladder up to design in their own ways, and still draws me to design or art direction is the fact you have to consider all kinds of mediums to create a visual story. Like, I never felt like I was the strongest illustrator or photographer or, whatever, but I like to think I have a decent eye. I definitely have an interest in all kinds of mediums still to this day, which I think is what is so appealing about art direction as a career. You learn about film, editing, composition, design, photography, interiors, motion design. Yeah, these are all things you have to consider when you're approaching a project. Sorry, I feel like I jumped ahead a little too much there, but high school, I had a pretty good art program, and I knew I wanted to go to art school, and my heart was on New York. I knew I wanted to go to New York. I had applied to quite a few different art schools. I applied to like SVA, CalArts, SCAD, Rollins, and my number one choice was always Pratt because I did a pre-college summer program at Pratt, and I loved it. I love that it was in New York, but it still had its own little campus, so it still felt like I would get somewhat of the traditional college experience there. I applied to Pratt. I got in. I did get a little bit of a scholarship. It's an expensive school. So I did get a scholarship, but not like enough to cover everything. I still had to take student loans out. I was like, I'm going to New York. Moved to Brooklyn when I was 18 to go to Pratt. And that was now, 12 years ago. Yeah, 12 years ago, because I went to college 2010. Crazy. I got my BFA in communications design, as they call it. The first year at Pratt, everybody has to take their foundation year, which is general fine arts classes before you get into the nitty-gritty of your major. Made a lot of friends. A lot of them I'm still good friends with to this day. I think if I can give any piece of advice, it is that the people that you go to school with in your programs or even just like design classes, that very well could be your future network. Honestly, my favorite jobs that I've had, I have gone through my Pratt community and people I have really good relationships with. I don't know, I really love that my little Pratt class, we kind of have our own economy. Like, everybody's always very willing to help each other out where they can and recommend each other for jobs, and it's honestly been really great to work with other people that I went to school with and that I know and can lean on in sometimes difficult work situations or scenarios. Basically, your community can definitely be your network, is what I'm trying to say. So hold on to that and try to nourish that while you are in the process of learning or networking or taking classes or workshops or whatever it is you're doing to upskill your design skills. My junior or senior year of college, I had a couple internships throughout college. One was with Style Like You. I don't know if anybody knows that anymore, but it was a really fun fashion blog founded by a mother-daughter duo, and it was, honestly, I just was kind of a photo archivist, helped organize their library, or it wasn't even that design focused. It was nice. I also had an internship with a agency that specialized in web design, specifically for luxury fashion brands. Oh, I hate it. I really didn't like that internship. It was, first of all, unpaid. Second of all, they had like no program for their interns, so like nobody ever knew what to do with me or the other intern at the time. So we're just, twiddling our thumbs, and that was a really bad experience. I feel like companies, agencies, if you're going to have an internship, you should be thoughtful in the programming of it and how to actually mentor upcoming designers. I feel like I was low-key kind of traumatized from that internship. I remember sitting in a meeting, just, a lot of times we would just like sit and observe just to kind of learn by osmosis. I think it was the founder was sharing it was one of the senior designers was sharing his screen, and he had an email up from the founders of the agency. And in the email, it was like subject line, interns. And the email said, if you guys can't find something for the interns to do, we're just gonna have to get rid of them. Like, so cold and rude. And the way I internalized that, like it was my fault and not the fault of the people working there and setting up this program. Wild. Honestly, in the early 2010s, I had some really weird work experiences that I look back on and I'm like, that was really unprofessional and not okay. Now I feel like I'm getting into trauma dump mode, but oh my goodness, I feel like I graduated and went straight into applying to jobs as a freelancer. Well, I was just applying to everything, and it felt like short contract work was the easiest thing to find, and I found something pretty soon after I graduated for a department store based out of New York. I won't name the name of it. It's not like a major national department store. And it was just doing like email design for them. Nothing super crazy or complicated, but it was another situation where I'm coming in as a junior designer and nobody seems to want to like teach the juniors or the entry-level people, and that was also a really bad experience. Their creative director was constantly like fighting, it felt like, with the other people. I don't know if the work culture in early 2010s was just so intensely mean. I remember one day she and I think he was like head of photography or something. Her and this guy got into a screaming match over my computer because we were reviewing a blog post I designed like a graphic for. They were both looking at it, and then I don't even know how they got into this fight. Like, there was obviously stuff going on there. They just started screaming at each other over my computer, and I was like, I have to get out of this place. This is not good. I would say my first few work experiences were really not good and just not set up for entry-level talent. And now that I am 11 years into my career, I can confidently say that was not cool. Okay, sorry for the vent. I feel like I vented for too long. We're going to fast forward a little bit. Basically, a friend of mine from Pratt was working full-time at this other creative agency, and she actually recommended me for a junior designer role there, full-time, so no weird freelance contract. They brought me in for an interview, and they liked me enough, and they trusted my friend, and I got hired. I consider that my first real job. It was with the agency Code and Theory. At the time, the agency was kind of divided into two branches. The bigger part that they're more well known for is their product website design projects, but I was on the brand side, which was kind of more advertising. I worked on the beauty accounts, which was a lot of fun. It was honestly a really good first job. I have such fond memories of that place. It showed me that not everywhere is like my terrible experiences I was having, and there's actual structure and mentorship, and I got to work with people I knew from Pratt, and I learned a lot about how to concept, how to design, how to think critically, how to go on shoots. It was basically my first job, but it was the coolest office I still have ever worked in. It was in like Prime Soho in the original Interview magazine office. So it was like where Andy Warhol worked. And it was so cozy and basically like a library. If I can find photos, I'm going to put them here. Had no idea at the time that I would never get to work in an office that cool. Yeah, I made some of my closest friends at that job and that agency, and I met a lot of really talented designers, and I have a lot of heart for code and theory. I left the agency job to go work at Pop Sugar, which is more of an editorial, like think BuzzFeed, Refinery29-esque type of website. Yeah, so I got to experience the more editorial industry, and my direct team is what they call advertorial. And that was a really good job too, honestly. But it was very cool to learn a different side of the industry, more editorial versus agency, and to work with editors and see how they craft their stories and write their stories, and got to try a lot of free product. We also had like very frequent photo shoots, so we would always work with this one photographer who's great, just shooting basically our own internal like stock library. I did really like that job too. I was there for a year, and I had applied to a job with my dream brand at the time. I won't say the name because this was also not a great experience. So this was going to be like my first in-house experience working on this brand social. Not a good culture fit. I think it taught me a lot about my working style and what I value in a job. And I think the important lesson there was just because you think a brand is cool doesn't mean it's going to be the best place to work. So keep that in mind. I knew I wanted to leave, and at this point I was like, I think I'm ready to go agency side again. And I had been talking to a good friend of mine, again from Pratt, who was at this startup agency, and we had always casually talked about him bringing me in at some point. So I reached out and was like, hey, if you guys are looking to expand, I'm ready to leave. I'm ready to move on. Long story short, he made it happen. I came in, met with the managing directors, and they brought me in. At the time, it was only like 15 people. It was tiny, total startup. We worked in a little WeWork office. I got to work with like the best people. Basically, I've been at this job for the last 7 years. I'm hitting 7 years this year, this May. The agency at the time, we did end up getting bought out. So now we're part of a much larger, bigger agency network. And we are still remote friendly, which I really value. I feel like I have enough flexibility, and I've hit a nice sweet spot of work-life balance. I think agency side, there are going to be some intense pushes. You're going to have late nights sometimes, but sometimes it's fine. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in the last 7 years. I've learned how to actually lead and manage a team of designers, animators, editors. And yeah, so I'm still with my current agency. It's the job I've been at the longest out of all my jobs. That's basically been my career journey. A lot of lessons learned about what I actually do value in a job. And what kind of culture makes me the most comfortable and that I thrive in, especially as an introvert. I will say, I think any industry, it's tougher for introverts, but advertising can be really extra harder for us just because we have to expel a little more energy. There's a lot of presenting you have to do, a lot of justifying your decisions externally and internally. I mean, that's the case with any job. It's very possible to thrive as an introvert in corporate America. I think we have our own skills and values to bring to the table. Okay, I feel like I yapped for a lot. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'm happy to help or answer any questions you might have. Thanks for listening to me yap and vent. I'll chat soon. Bye.